wish you all a very good morning. This year we start the Legdem programs of the Isai Iyal Nataka Vizha with the first program by V. SRIRAM on GOPALA BHARATHI. He is being supported by Bharat Sundar. Looking forward to a great program. Thank you.
Thank you, DC, for having invited me. Thank you, VANIMAHAL, for having made this a part of my annual calendar, at least, that every year I am invited here. I'm very happy to be present in this auditorium, and I'm very grateful to Bharat Sundar for having agreed to come and sing some of the compositions of GOPALA BHARATHI today. Bharati is one of the most fascinating names in Carnatic music history. We always associate him with the Nandan Charitram, and the two are completely interlinked with each other. When you say Nandan Charitram, we think of GOPALA BHARATHI. When we say GOPALA BHARATHI, we say Nandan Charitram. But there was much more to Bharati than just the Nandan Charitram, though it was a very significant part of his persona and his contribution to Carnatic music. There was a lot of Bharati himself in the Nandan that he created, and there was a lot of the Nandan in GOPALA BHARATHI. Certainly the Nandan that we see in the Periya Puranam is markedly different to the Nandan that we see in the Nandanar Charitram of GOPALA BHARATHI, though the two tales are essentially the same broadly in terms of structure. Bharati himself was born in very interesting times. The Carnatic Trinity were alive at the time that Bharati was born, and each one of them was making a name for himself at that point of time. Prior to Bharati, there had been several great Tamil composers, and all of them would go into decline for almost a century with the arrival of the Carnatic Trinity, and then they would be resurrected once again along with Bharati himself. Surprisingly, Bharati never went into decline. Though he lived contemporaneously with the Carnatic Trinity, and he was not even somebody as, how shall I put it, as financially deprived as Muthuswami Dikshitar was better off than Bharati, as we shall see. And he had disciples who could carry his music forward. There were patrons of the extended family. Bharati really had none. And despite all that, Bharati's music survived, and when the resurrection of Tamil composers happened in the 20th century, Bharati also came to occupy center stage. Bharati was born in, GOPALA BHARATHI was born in Narimanam, which is in the Kaveri basin, a very fertile area where the Kaveri finally ends up in the sea. And that is where GOPALA BHARATHI was born. Bharati seems to have been a family name. Because of erudition, because of learning, it seems to have been a title. We certainly get to know that Bharati's great-grandfather, of whose name we don't know, was a veena player. And Bharati's father also was a veena player, and his name was Ramaswamy Bharati. Bharati's mother, we have no idea what was her name. But there, he is in august company, because for most Carnatic music composers, we don't know their mothers' names. Mothers and wives are the most expendable elements in Carnatic music, because most of them were born due to divine blessing. And after that, the wife was only meant to take care of the husband and make sure that he composed in peace. Markedly different from the wives of today. But let's get on with the story. Bharati was orphaned at a very early age. He seems to have been brought up by a kinsman called Anantaramayar, who cheated Bharati at a very early age of all the land, or there was very little land in any case. Whatever little land was owned by Bharati was usurped or taken over by the uncle, and Bharati was abandoned. And then he grew up essentially on charity. He, as a young boy, people seem to have taken pity on him. He seemed to have lived under the patronage of various people. Some appears to have acquired some form of education and certainly a high degree of fluency in Tamil. And it appears to have affected his physical appearance quite a bit. Because Swaminatha Iyer says that when he saw Bharati, he found that he was physically very unprepossessing. He was stooped. He had a prominent Adam's apple. He had a few, spikes of hair on his head. And he had enormous waist. He was stooped. He was carrying a stick when he walked. So I think early financial deprivation, malnutrition, all of this must have had its impact on Bharati. We don't know when Gopala Krishna Bharati was born. Much later in the 20th century, M.S. Ramaswamy Iyer, who was an early chronicler and a historian of Carnatic music, he would travel widely in Ananda Tandavapuram, Mudikondan and other places and interview certain elderly ladies, and based upon hearsay would calculate that Bharati was born in 1811. So today that is accepted as Gopala Krishna Bharati's year of birth, 1811. So just to give you a context, Shama Shastri would be dead 15 years from then, 1826. By the time Gopala Krishna Bharati was 15, Shama Shastri would have gone. By the time he was 25 or 24, Muthuswami Dikshitar would have also gone away. And Tyagaraja would live for 12 years after that. So by the time Gopala Krishna Bharati was in his 40s, Tyagaraja too had gone. But given that he started off with so many disadvantages, he was fated to live fairly long, and he appears to have lived up to the age of 70, passing away in 1881. So this is broadly the bare bones biographical sketch we have of Gopala Krishna Bharati. Perhaps because he was deprived of parents when he was very young, he saw that Shiva also did not have parents. In this, like Purandara Dasa, so Ninnarasi Lakumi Nannatayi, Ninnataya Toro, who is your mother? My mother is Lakshmi. And, I have a Swami, you don't have a Swami. I am a Swadesi, I live in your land, but you are a Paradesi, you don't have anything. So this is how Purandara Dasa speaks about Vishnu. So similarly, Gopala Krishna Bharati describes Shiva in a very evocative song, which later would be used by other composers as well, using the same theme. So let's hear from Bharat.
தந்தை தாயிருந்தால் உலகத்தில் உமக்கிந்த தாழ்வெல்லாம் வருமோ ஐயா பெற்ற தந்தை தாயிருந்தால் உலகத்தில் உமக்கிந்த தாழ்வெல்லாம் வருமோ ஐயா பெற்ற தந்தை தாயிருந்தால் உலகத்தில் உமக்கிந்த தாழ்வெல்லாம் வருமோ ஐயா அந்த மிகுந்த ஸ்ரீ அம்பலவாணரே அந்த மிகுந்த ஸ்ரீ அம்பலவாணரே அந்த மிகுந்த ஸ்ரீ அம்பலவாணரே அருமையுடனே பெற்று பெருமையுடன் வளர்த்த அருமையுடனே பெற்று பெருமையுடன் வளர்த்த தந்தை தாயிருந்தால் உலகத்தில் உமக்கிந்த தாழ்வெல்லாம் வருமோ ஐயா.
It appears that Bharati, during the course of his initial wanderings, also went to Kootanur and served in the temple of Jnana Saraswati, which is there. And again, this is only hearsay. We don't have any factual evidence that he went to Kutanur, that he stayed there, but since it is in the same region, very likely that he went there. And finally, he arrives in Thiruvidai Marudur. Mahalinga Swami, Brihat Sundara Kuchambal. So in this temple, he appears to have lived for quite some time. Later, he would also go to Mayuram. Between Mayuram and Thiruvidai Marudur, he appears to have shuttled for quite some time in his life. Now, Thiruvidai Marudur, at that time, the period that we are looking at is, early in the 19th century. So we are looking at, say, 1820s or so. At that time, Thiruvidai Marudur was a royal court by itself, in the sense that the Tanjavur royalty had, there had been a lot of complicated successions. And finally, when Sarfoji became the Maratha ruler in 1798, his uncle, Amarasimha, had to be deposed. And he was sent away to Thiruvidai Marudur, where he was allowed to build a large palace for himself and live as a prince in exile. And after Amarasimha, his son Pratapasimha also lived in the same palace, and today the palace survives as a bare ruin with no doors, no windows, a complete empty shell. But at one point of time, this is where very great patronage for music was extended. So when Pratapasimha and prior to him Amarasimha were living, several great musicians had come over here. For instance, Muthuswami Dikshitar's father, Ramaswamy Dikshitar himself, was a protege of Amarasimha. And when his son, Pratapasimha II, becomes the, I will not call him a ruler, but I will call him the head of the Thiruvidai Marudur establishment, let me call him that. When he was living there, you had Ghanam Krishnayar in this place as an Asthana Vidwan. You also had a Hindustani musician called Ramdas Swami. So because the Marathas, as we all know, were very fond of, while they not only embellished our culture, they also extended a lot of patronage to Telugu. They never lost their roots, and they were bringing the Maratha influence heavily into the Tanjavur area, and our culture got enriched because of that. Today, much of what we consider Carnatic music is essentially because of value additions by the Marathas, something that we will not readily acknowledge today. But even the usage of the mridangam in its present form, the arrival of the chaptal, which is so Mishra Chapu, Khanda Chapu, the Usital, the Harikatha tradition, which got greatly enhanced by the Maratha Kirtankars, the usage of a tremendous amount of Hindustani ragas. So today we often say that Muthuswami Dikshitar went to Varanasi, learnt Hindustani music and came back. Much of that is fallacious, because around 100 years before Muthuswami Dikshitar, those Hindustani ragas were documented in Tanjavur as being in vogue. And therefore, when the Marathas came here, they brought their Hindustani music along with them. And so there was this Ramdas Swami, and there was also Ghanam Krishnayar. It appears that Gopala Krishna Bharati learnt music from both of them. And this is factually established because Uve Swaminatha Iyer, in his biography of Gopala Krishna Bharati, and who knew Gopala Krishna Bharati personally, he says that he has told me that I learned music from Hindustani music from Ramdas Swami, and he also learned music from Ghanam Krishnayar. So before we go on to the disciple, let's have a song by Ghanam Krishnayar.
யார் போய் சொல்லுவர் எனக்கான பேரையும் காணும், யார் போய் சொல்லுவர் எனக்கான பேரையும் காணும், யார் போய் சொல்லுவர் எனக்கான பேரையும் காணும், யார் போய் சொல்லுவர் எனக்கான பேரையும் செய்வே அன்னமே நான் என்ன செய்வே
He also appears to have been deeply influenced by a guru called Govinda Sivam. Who this Govinda Sivam was, what was his, which school of philosophy did he come from, we have no idea about all this. But he has composed a song on where he refers to his guru. எங்கள் குருநாதருடைய இணையடி தொழுவாய் மனமே திங்கள் உதயம் போலே கோவிந்த சிவம் என்று இந்த பூமியில் வந்த எங்கள் குருநாதருடைய இணையடி தொழுவாய் மனமே. So there is a composition which is referring to a guru called Govinda Sivam, and Bharati seems to have become a person of a very deeply philosophical bent of mind. As it is, he did not have any worldly possessions, and that only appears to have spurred him on in that direction. And while he never took to sannyasa, he practically lived like a sannyasi. And it is said that he never had a house of his own. He preferred to live on the thinnai of the house of his disciples and his patrons. So he lived outside their house, and he did unchavritti, just like Tyagaraja did. He went around singing songs and collected alms, and based on that he was leading a life. But Lord Shiva was not going to let him just exist like that. So God does not like his devotees to be just spending their time meditating on him. He wants them to do some solid action and to contribute something in this earth. And so Gopala Krishna Bharati's life was also going to turn. See, the women of all these places, Mayavaram, Chidambaram, etc., wherever he was going and he was doing Unchavritti, invariably they were the people that he would see every day in the morning when they would come out to offer him alms. And they found his compositions to be very interesting. They began to request him to compose kummi and kolatam for them, which they could sing during weddings. And that was really his first initiation into composing. And these compositions became very much in demand. And all these women, wherever they went for a wedding or whatever, they always would come to him, and they would learn these compositions and go. And gradually, his talent as a composer came to be noticed. Then, from there, given his erudition, given his knowledge, he also became a discourser. People began to invite him to come and give Shiva Kathas. So just like Harikatha, he would take a theme with Lord Shiva as the central theme, and he would then begin narrating the story, accompanied by music at various places to illustrate the points. Bharati also seems to have been greatly influenced, and in turn also influenced another Bharati, a man called Ananta Bharati. Ananta Bharati was also living in Mayavaram at the same time as Gopala Krishna Bharati was living, and Ananta Bharati was in the midst of composing the Bhagavata Dashamaskanda Kirtanas. The whole of the Bhagavatam, the Dashamaskandam, was created into compositions. And there is only one copy of that book available, which is today in the Music Academy Library. Worldwide, we have made a search and we have not found it in any other location. There is only one copy of that book available. And last year, a presentation on that was done by Srimati Sujata Vijayaraghavan, with music also presented at that time. So this Ananta Bharati was greatly influenced by Gopala Krishna Bharati. And when he wrote compositions for the Uttara Ramacharithram, it is said that Bharati, Uve Swaminathan writes that Bharati helped him in doing that. And he in turn showed his compositions to Ananta Bharati, and so there appears to have been a very collaborative exercise between the two. Bharati was greatly attached to the Mayavaram Mayuranatha Swami temple, and there in the southwest corner of that temple Prakaram there is an Agasteshwarar Sannadhi, and that is where he would go and spend hours in meditation and became practically a yogi. But his heart was always in Thillai. he always wanted to be in Chidambaram. And he would go to Chidambaram as often as he could. And gradually he became very greatly attached and associated with Chidambaram itself. It is no wonder that, he would be so greatly attached to this particular temple, because this was the place where Appar, Sundarar, Jnanasambandar and Manikavachakar, all four of them had worshipped. All four of them had endowed the place with their compositions. Several of the Aravati mover had attained mukti in this particular location. Just like Srirangam is referred to as Kovil by the Vaishnavites, Chidambaram is referred to as Kovil by the Shaivites. This is where Nambi Andar Nambi discovered the Tevaram and with the help of Rajaraja Chola, made sure that it was resurrected. And from then on, there would be a continuous composing history as far as Chidambaram was concerned. So there would be, apart from the Tevara mover and Manikavachakar, later on you would have Arunagirinathar, and then much later Marimutta Pillai, Muthutandavar, both of them, one of the Sirghadi mover, that is Marimutta Pillai, Muthutandavar, Arunachala Kavirayar, who were the previous century to Gopala Krishna Bharati. And then Bharati himself, Muthuswami Dikshitar, and the line, it doesn't end. It goes on coming well into contemporary times, right up to Ambujam Krishna. Everybody has composed on Chidambaram. It's something, there is a certain pull exercised by the temple which seems to be undiminished over all these years. In this temple, you had, of the Sirghadi mover, we find that Gopala Krishna Bharati in his composing was greatly influenced by all three of the Sirghadi mover. This is not something that is very widely discussed or talked about, but when you read his compositions more and more, you begin to realize that he was following a very great tradition. So I will dwell briefly on two of them. So first of all, Marimutta Pillai, who would compose in a slightly sarcastic vein in a few compositions. So, Enneramum oru kaalai thooki irukum vagai edaiya ponnaiya. So, what is the reason why you are like this? Similarly, Papa Vinasa Mudaliyar, whom also Gopala Krishna Bharati appears to have known very well. Swaminatha Iyer writes about that also. So, he also used to write like a Mugatai Kati Edekam, about Tyagesha and Thiruvarur. You are forever only showing your face, whereas you are hidden your body. I am sure there is something wrong with you somewhere. Even when you are bathing, we come and try to see you, but even then you are completely covered. Tell us what is the problem with you, etc., etc. So these were the kind of liberties that, because they were so close to the Lord, they were able to take those liberties. So Gopala Krishna Bharati also writes similarly, and some of those compositions are very, very interesting. And I don't know in today's world whether we would be stoned if we said that such compositions existed, but still it is worthwhile to just Peyandi Thanai Kande Ni Yendi Mayal Kondai Pengalukku Alaha Modi. So, one older woman is addressing a younger woman about her having fallen in love with Shiva. Mayandi Sudalayil Valvandi Kaliyudan Vadadi Sudadi Vazhakkadi Tirivandi. So this is his description of Shiva. Then the Kannappan Echilai Ugandu Tindrandi Kalane Kalal Udaithu Kondrandi Pennai Sadai Meedil Vaithu Kondandi Pittasayale Pirambadi Pattandi. So this is one. The other one is even better. Yenge Tedi Piditayadi Mane in the Vadivone Yenge Bangamana Murudu Elimbum Anivandi Pambai Thukum Chitrambalatandi Meyil Engum Vennirihal Pusi Vidi Engum Varuvan Paradesi Thuya Venni Danile Uru Vesi. He's got a woman of doubtful morals on his hair. Sor Vuramale Sumapandi Chi Chi. He is carrying that woman on his head and going all around the place. What kind of a fellow is he? So this is his description of Shiva. So this Ninda Stuti, as we would refer to it, seems to have been a tradition where he was following Marimutta Pillai. When it comes to Muthutandavar, we find that there are several compositions where Bharati seems to have followed Muthu Tandavar. For instance, very famous, we have Muthu Tandavar's Kanamal Veenile Kalam Kazhithome. The entire song is a description of the Chidambaram temple. Similarly, we have Enneramum Un Sannidhi Ilenan, which is Gopala Krishna Bharati's composition. And both of them have very, very similar descriptions. So I will just read out a small portion of Kanamal Veenile Kalam Kazhithome. Shenadar Potrum Thillai Chidambarathalathai Kanamal Veenile Kalam Kazhithome. Seran Shoran Pandiyan Iraniyan Chei Gopuramum Dheera Veera Bhupan Cheida Thirumadilgalum Par Ulagum Potrugintra Panchakshara Padigalum Aranangal Shulnthiru Ayirakal Mandabamum Kanamal Veenile Kalam Kazhithome. Gangayin Nirainda Sivagangayum Padithurayum Mangai Sivagami Ammai Vasal Pani Mani Mandabamum Thingalani Tirumulanadar Arut Sannadiyum Pungu Selvam Pol Uyarnda Thanga Per Ambalamum Kanamal Veenile. Nrithasabai, Kanakasabai, Chitsabai, Darisanamum, Mukti Peralam, Enave, Murangum, Sinna Thuniyum, Bhaktargatku, Siranda, Govindarajar, Sannidhiyum, Sutrilum, Tulangu, Ratna, Sornak, Kodi Marangalum, Kanamal Veenile, Kalam Kazhithome. Thillai Muvairavar, Munivar, Peru Vedigalum, Allum Pagalum, Alikum, Annadana Sirappum, Sollariya Madangalum, Soleigalum, Vavigalum, Nallathiru Kootangalum, Naluthiru Vedigalum, Kanamal Veenile, Kalam Kazhithome. This is Muthu Tandavar. Now, when we come to Gopala Krishna Bharati, the Enneramum, Tennam Solai Shul, Tenpuliyur, Ponnambala Tarase, Ennarase, Disai Enganum, Pugarum, Sivagangayum, Devasabayum, Sivagami Darisanamum, Pasikodadu, Partha Perukku, Kalankankal, Parandida, Magizhindu, Unnai Paadikondu, Enneramum, Panchakshara Padiyum, Kodikambamum, Padinazhagum, Aridana Rahasiyamum, Anjel Endru Koorum, Manivosayum, Antakarana Mayakam Thirndu Paadikondu. Even today, when the Deeparadhana happens, multiple bells are rung at the same time in the Chidambaram temple. It's a very unique feature of that temple. Seelam Aruvum, Teruvum, Tirukootamum, Devar Ulakil Kidayada Adisayamum, Balakrishnan Paniyum, Padam, Bhavamenum, Bayangal Thirndu, Malargal Thuvi Toldu Kondu Enneramum. So this kind of composition, similarly, compositions describing various festivals in the temple, the Ther coming out, both of them have composed. How to enter the temple, which entrance do you come by, then how do you go out? All of these are very similar to both Muthu Tandavar as well as Gopala Krishna Bharati. Now that we have Nataraja in front of us, let us have any one composition of Gopala Krishna. Now you must remember that Bharati was not just a composer of the Nandan Charitram. There were a lot of independent compositions, and these are called Vidudi Kirtanehal. And these are the compositions where the Mudra Gopala Krishnan or Balakrishnan appears. Nandan Charitram compositions do not have the Mudra in them.
Kanden Kalitindin Kanden Kalitindin Karunai Kadalai Nan 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 Kanden Kalitindin.
So there are plenty of compositions that are just dedicated to Thillai as a place, and they also show how much he knew about every little part of that temple. And he appears to have practically, if you read his compositions, I think we get an encyclopedic knowledge of how the temple is laid out. So there are some very beautiful songs. I'll just read out two of them. One of them is inviting a small girl to come to visit the temple. Kanaka Sabhapati ki namaskaram pannadi penne சனக மகா முனிவர் போற்றும் சந்நிதி அடி கண்ணே வீதி வலம் வந்து, ஃபர்ஸ்ட் go around, மேலை கோபுரம் வாசல் நுழைந்து, come through the western entrance of the கோபுரம், காதலுடன் சிவகாமி கழிக்கும் மண்டபம் வந்து, first come to the சிவகாமி அம்மை shrine, மாதவன் கோபாலகிருஷ்ணன் வணங்கும் அம்பலம் அறிந்து, நாதனே உன் அடைக்கலம் என்று நனிமகிழ்ந்து தலை குனிந்து கனக சபாபதிக்கு நமஸ்காரம் பண்ணிடி பெண்ணே. So this is one. Then you cannot escape Govindaraja. He is also there. So Tiruchitrakutam, as it is known to the Vaishnavites. So Gopala Krishna Bharati has his share of fun at the expense of the Vaishnavites. சிதம்பரம் என்று சொல்லாமலே இதை சித்திரக்கூட்டம் என்று சொல்லி நிதம் கொண்டாடும் ஐயங்கார்கள் வந்து நிற்கிறார் பாருங்கடி. This is in the Chidambara Kummi. So they will not come in this direction. They will only go straight, see Tiruchitrakutam and get out through the other entrance. So he has brought that into one of his compositions. There are, as I said, similarly descriptions of the Ther and all that. Now, Bharati had become fairly well known thanks to his Harikatha, the Shivakatha, thanks to his composing abilities. And towards the end of Tyagaraja's life, we are told by Uve Swaminatha himself. And Swaminatha got to know this from Gopala Krishna Bharati, that he visited Tyagaraja. And he says that Tyagaraja was, at that point of time, with all his disciples, he was conducting music lessons, and Bharati went and sat down in the corner. And Tyagaraja is supposed to have asked, where have you come from? And then he said, I come from Mudikondan. And then he said, have you heard of a Gopala Krishna Bharati who lives over there? So Tyagaraja knew about him already. And he said, I am that person. And Tyagaraja was very pleased. And this is where it gets a little confusing. So Swaminatha says that the disciples were all singing Shriramya Chitta Alankara Swarupa in the Raga Abhogi. Whereas it is in Jayamanohari. So there is only one note which is different. Not Jayamanohari.
Purna Sajjan, right? Purna Sajjan.
No, I don't. Jayamanohari.
Jayamanohari.
Sorry, I forgot. So there is only one note difference between the two. So was Sri Ramya Chitta Alankara Swarupa composed in Abhogi? And did it change over a period of time? This is a mystery that we have no answer to. But the story is very clear. Bharati was asked by Tyagaraja, have you composed anything in Abhogi? And Gopala Krishna Bharati said no. But that evening he goes back and he sings Sabhapati Ki Veridevam in front of Tyagaraja. Tyagaraja is very pleased. So this is how the story, and it is a fact, because it is very clearly narrated by Gopala Krishna Bharati himself to Swaminatha Iyer. Now, Bharati, during the course of his wanderings, arrives at what is known as the 18 Vatima villages which surround Mayavaram, which is Ananda Tandavapuram, Koneri Rajapuram, Mudikondan, Chemangudi, all these places. Extraordinarily fertile belt, full of fields with multiple bhogams in 1 year, very, very wealthy landlords belonging to what is known as the Madhyama community, a community that was known as much for musicians as it was for its patronage extended to musicians, for its very rich bhajana sampradaya traditions. You look at it, Koneri Rajapuram Vaidyanatha Iyer, Chemangudi Narayana Swami Iyer, Tirukodi Krishna Iyer, Chemangudi Srinivasa Iyer, Mudikondan Venkatrama Iyer, P.S. Narayana Swami. The list is practically endless. There were so many of them who came from that community. And here in Ananda Tandavapuram, Gopala Krishna Bharati becomes the guest or the protege of Annu Iyer, who is a very famous landlord of that particular area. By this time, Bharati is being paid in cash for some of his performances. And strangely, Bharati has no use for that cash. So what he does is, he gives the money to Annu Iyer as an investment, and Annu Iyer is keeping it, and the money is gradually earning interest, and it is remaining with Annu Iyer. So Bharati becomes a guest of Annu Iyer, stays in Annu Iyer's house, in the Thinnai of course, never inside, is fed by Annu Iyer, taken care of him. He follows Annu Iyer wherever he goes in the fields. He observes the behavior of all the farm hands. He observes the way Annuvayar is controlling the land, how he is taking care of the cultivation. All of this is getting into his very rich mind. And then he, during the course of his travels from here, he goes to Nagapattinam. Nagapattinam at that point of time was a great center for Tamil learning because it was a port town. There were lots of these Nagaratars were living over there, Chettiars. These Nagaratars were great patrons of Tamil, of Harikatha, of Carnatic music. And so, when Bharati goes there, he is invited by Kandapa Chettiar, who is a ship dubash, Kapal dubash. So he is, ship chandling, he is taking care of financing various shipping expeditions and all that. And Kandapa Chettiar asks Bharati, have you ever composed a story? Have you ever done a Shivakatha with one of the Nayanmars as your principal theme? Now, this Bharati says that I am aware of most of the stories, I have not done it so far. And Kandapa Chettiar says, perhaps now is the time for you to start working on creating a complete story, a nirupanam with a Harikatha, Shivakatha of one of the Aravati movers. And so Bharati had this great fascination for the story of Nandan. He believed that Nandan was like him. Nandan was a person who had been discarded by society. Nandan was a person who had fought various challenges and then who had come up and finally gained the grace of God. And it is said, and I don't know, I have been to Chidambaram even recently, Kanna Marakkiradhu solluvalya, so I didn't notice it. I had read it so many times. Apparently in the Nritya Sabha there is a statue of Nandan. And that was the statue that inspired Bharati to take up the Nandanar Charitram. And we spent hours in the Nritya Sabha, Vidya, myself, Sharda and so many others. None of it never occurred to us. We just, we came away, we were all busy shedding tears over Sri Ranjani Santana Gopalan singing. And we came away. But apparently there is a statue there. So next time I go, I must find out which one it is. And he decided that he would make Nandan Charitram his work. Kandapa Chettiar apparently told him that you stay in Nagapattinam till you finish. And we will take care of all your requirements. But Bharati said, I would prefer to go back to Mayuram and I will work on it over there and I will return in due course of time with my opera completed. So Kandapa Chettiar arrives one morning before Bharati is leaving, and Bharati that day has decided that he will start working on the Nandan Charitram. He arrives with a big basket of fruits and along with a lot of other gifts for Bharati. And so, Parang Narungamanum, that is, the fruit will come unto me. This becomes the opening line of the first line of the Nandan Charitram, which Gopala Krishna Bharati writes. He describes the place where the people who lived along with Nandan, the community of people who lived with Nandan, where they lived, that area was described in the beginning of the Nandan Charitram. He then goes away and he starts working on it in Mayavaram and continues on it for a few years. And by the grace of Shiva, the Nandan Charitram is completed. Now, Nandan Charitram by itself is a very interesting contrast with what is there in the Periya Puranam and what is there in Gopala Krishna Bharati's Nandanar Charitram. So, in the Periya Puranam, Nandanar is the 19th Nayanmar. He is referred to as Tirunalai Povar. So, Tirunalai Povar is an outcast. He lives where people who are outside the pale of the four Varnas live. And he, in the Periya Puranam, very clearly was a man who was dealing with skins and bones and hides. And he was supplying whatever was required for musical instruments, like drums, like stringed instruments. You know, in those days, catgut was what was being used. Catgut is not really catgut, it is sheep gut. But that is what was being used for making instruments and all that. So this was what he was supplying. And the Periya Puranam has 36 verses on the Nandanar Charitram. It is one of the smallest. Tirunalai Povar Puranam is one of, it's not as small as Vailar Nayanar, who's only 10 verses. But Tirunalai Povar is definitely one of the smaller. It's only 36 verses. out of which the first 11 verses are a description of Adanur where Nandan lived. And Nandan Charitram in Tirunalai Povar Puranam begins only from verse 12. So there are only 24 verses which describe the story of Nandanar. And it is very simple. Nandanar was living in the, along with his community people. He was taking care of their traditional work. He became very interested in Shiva, in Bhakti, in Shiva Bhakti. And therefore he became increasingly involved in worshipping Shiva. He goes to Tirupungur, and there he stands outside the temple because he can't go in. There is an enormous Nandi blocking the way, and Lord Shiva tells the Nandi to move, so the Nandi moves. Nandan worships Shiva from outside, and then he goes away. And because there is a small tank over there which is very tiny, he makes it into a large tank, and then he leaves. And he visits various other Shaivite shrines. Then he decides that he must go to Chidambaram. But he doesn't think that he is qualified to go to Chidambaram, and therefore every day he says, I will go tomorrow. So he is known as Tirunalai Povar, Nalai Povar, Nalai Povar, Nalai Povar, so on and so forth. Finally, one day he goes to Chidambaram. Now when he arrives in Chidambaram, he is overawed by the four walls of the village, the temple. He is wandering around, he is seeing the homam being done by the Dikshitars and all that. He doesn't think that he is qualified to enter the temple. Lord Shiva arrives in his dream and tells him that don't worry, tomorrow in the morning the Dikshitars will receive you. You have to enter into a sacrificial fire. When you come out of it, you will be purified and you will become my devotee. The Dikshitars themselves will bring you into the temple. So the Dikshitars also get the corresponding dream. So next day in the morning, Nandanar and the Dikshitars, they meet. Outside their temple, they build a sacrificial fire. Nandanar enters that fire. He comes out looking like Brahma seated on a lotus with the sacred thread on his chest. I have serious problems with this story. Not because I wear it myself, but I have serious problems as a story. For the simple reason, this is in Periya Puranam, mind you, this is not Nandanar, Nandan Charitram. Periya Puranam, where for the remaining 62, Shiva does not distinguish with gender, he does not distinguish caste, he takes them all as they are. For Nandan alone, he has to turn into a Brahmin. And he has to come out of the sacrificial fire wearing a sacred thread with vibhuti and all that. Then the Dikshitars lead him into the sanctum and he vanishes. We don't know where he went. He is supposed to have merged with the Lord. This is the Periya Puranam. I, as a person, I have a problem with this story that the Lord, if he was the Lord, could not have laid conditions like that. He would have accepted Nandan as Nandan. So, and only one person to have made that difference is a little disturbing to me. I come back to now Gopala Krishna Bharati. These 24 verses, let's leave out the first 11, only 24. With that, he creates an enormous opera called the Nandan Charitram. And here, Nandan is a farmhand. And there is a Brahmin landlord, the Vaidya, who is very clearly based on Annuvayar, whom he had seen all along. And the same kind of behavior that the farmhand is a bonded laborer. He is working in the farm and the rest of it is all there, going to Tirupungur, coming out of it, then all that is there. But the struggle of going to Chidambaram becomes a very big story in the Nandanar Charitram. The Vaidya refusing to give him permission to go. Then Lord Shiva intervening at one point of time and making sure that the fields are not only ploughed, they are sowed, they are everything and they are reaped in one night. So the Vaidya realizes that there is a miracle. And then Nandanar goes to Chidambaram. Now, in the course of the story, if Annuvayar was the hidden landlord, Gopala Krishna Bharati also brings some of his friends into the story. Rajaratna Dikshitar, Shivashankara Dikshitar, they were all real people whom he knew very well. And they were all being brought into the Nandanar Charitram. This was his thanksgiving. Perhaps these were the people who had helped him so many times in, when he was alone, when he was lonely, when he did not have resources. These people must have showered their kindness on him. So he decided to bring them all into the story. And finally, Nandan Charitram is ready. Nandan Charitram is no ordinary work. I will come to I think I've spoken a little too long. So let's now go on to a little bit of music, because this is Rajam's painting of Nandan standing at the entrance of Tiruppungur, wanting to go in. And he sings, Vali maraithirukkude, Malai pole oru maadu paduttirukkude.
Vali maraithirukkude, Malai pole oru maadu paduttirukkude. Vali maraithirukkude, Malai pole oru maadu paduttirukkude. Vali maraithirukkude, Malai pole oru maadu paduttirukkude. Pavi Nandan ninda ஊரில் வந்தும் பாவி நந்தன் இந்த ஊரில் வந்தும் பாவி நந்தன் இந்த ஊரில் வந்தும் இவன் பாவம் தீரேனோ பாதத்தில் சேரேனோ ஏரேனோ சிவ லோகநாத. பாவம் தீரேனோ பாதத்தில் சேரேனோ ஏரேனோ சிவலோகநாத. வழி மறைத்திருக்குது மலை போலே ஒரு மாடு படுத்திருக்குது.
The tunes that Bharati had set his songs to have changed over a period of time. So this is one of the most traditional ways of singing it in Natakuranji. There is a tune in Thodi. There are also tunes in Bhairavi and Saveri for Varimaraithirukkude. Similarly, Shatre Vilagi Irum Pillai also is sung in various ways. So many of these compositions have changed over a period of time. But what has not changed is the impact that these compositions have had on public imagination. So Tiruppungur, for instance, not because of Bharati, even earlier to Bharati, this is a Nayak sculpture in Tiruppungur. So when you go there, you find that the Nandi is at one corner of the entrance mandapam. And if you look to the rear of this, you will find that the Dvajastambam is in alignment with the Nandi. It is not in alignment with the Lord. So this was meant so that Nandanar could see Shiva, and there is a temple to Nandanar at the end of the street. From where there is a very clear line of sight to Shiva. So that statue of Nandanar that you saw, which I put up in the beginning in this slide, was taken from that Tiruppungur shrine outside in the street. Then this is the Nandan Kulam, which Nandanar is supposed to have dug, which is just behind the Tiruppungur temple. So Bharati completes his Nandanar Charitram, he returns to Nagapattinam, and there he performs he inaugurates or he discourses on the Nandanar Charitram as a full-length opera. He sings every one of the compositions himself, and it goes on for 3 days. Because he has to explain every part of it, and then he sings the compositions, and huge crowds begin arriving. They not only come from Nagapatnam, they come from Karaikal, they come from various places to listen to Gopala Krishna Bharati singing his compositions and to listening to his Nandan Charitram. It becomes an enormous hit. There was never such a performance either before or after. It's all the rage. After it is completed in the temple, he is now invited into home after home after home, where he is asked to perform the Nandan Charitram once again. And he continues to perform it, and the crowd is following him wherever he goes. And it becomes one of those sensational successes as far as Tamil literature or prose or poetry or opera or whatever you may call it. And the Vediyar has come to stay. Because though he does not occur in the Periya Puranam, today it is impossible to imagine Nandanar Charitram without the Vediyar, the Brahmin, because he is so much a flesh and blood creature which Gopala Krishna Bharati created, that it is impossible for us to imagine that in the Periya Puranam such a character just doesn't exist. And so in that Tirupungur temple, they have actually got a statue like this put up on the Gopuram. So we can make out that this is post the 1840s, 1850s. After the Nandanar Charitram was staged by Gopala Krishna Bharati, whenever they built this particular shrine, actually this is a 20th century construction, they have put up this statue of Nandan standing like that and the Vediyar standing like this. And in my opinion, when you look at the dramatic and the cinematic renditions of Nandanar Charitram, the character of the Vediyar is very, very powerful indeed. So let us see how Serigalathur Chama and Dandapani Desikar act it out in Gemini's Nandanar.
ஆமா இருக்கு. அதை கண்ட பேகி ஜனன மரண பிணியை கருக்குதாம். கண்ட பேகி ஜனன மரண பிணியை கருக்குதாம். அப்புறம் இன்னும் என்னென்ன பண்றது? உயரு சிகர கும்பம் தெரியுதாம். தெரியுது. அதை பார்ப்பவர்க்கே உள்ள குளிர கருணை புரியுதாம். ஓஹோ, உள்ளமே குளிர்றதோ? அப்புறம் போய் வரேக. யாரு? நான் போய் வரேக. எங்கடா? இல்லை போய் வரேக உத்தாரம் தாருமே. ஓஹோ, உத்தரவு கேட்டு போக வந்திருக்கியோ? நான் போய் வரேக உத்தாரம் தாருமே. உங்கள் பொன்னடி போய் போகுதேன் கண்ணாலே பாருமே. ஐயனே போய் வரேக உத்தாரம் தாருமே. இல்ல பித்துக்குளி, என்னடா பேத்துற? ஆமா, நீ நேத்திக்கு அந்த பசங்களோட
So the song Thillai Ambala Thalamondru Irukudam doesn't have these interventions by the Vediyar in Gopala Krishna Bharati's Nandan Charitram. This is obviously Vasan's creativity coming into play, but you can imagine how the song has lent itself to becoming a dialogue between two people when actually it was meant to be a solo. And so that was the amount of space that Bharati's Nandanar Charitram gives for interpretation, for extrapolation, and so on. And so they have also got a statue to Bharati in that same shrine to Nandan in Thirupungur. He's right on top of the Mantapam. So very much whoever did it has realized that it is because of Bharati that Nandan is such a star. And so they decided to honor the composer also on top. Now, Bharati has performed his Nandanar Charitram. It has become a huge success. Every night, government officers or government clerks from Karaikal are arriving in Nagapattinam to listen to the compositions. And when they go back the next day, they are not able to work. They are all nodding away in office. The French collector of Karaikal is most puzzled, Isai. So he makes enquiries and asks what exactly is happening. Then they all tell him, don't you know, there is a man called Bharati who has arrived. He is doing this phenomenal storytelling. So, we are all going there every night. So Isai also comes along. He sits through the Nandan Charitram. Then Bharati is invited to Karaikal. And finally, Isai says that such a wonderful work cannot just remain part of verbal tradition. It has to be printed. And therefore, the first edition of Nandanar Charitram by Gopala Krishna Bharati is published thanks to Isai Durai. It is acknowledged in the book. There is a French collector of Karaikal who funds the Tamil work, which is done by Gopala Krishna Bharati. So that is how the Nandan Charitram becomes a huge success. Now, what is the reason for the Nandan Charitram being such a huge success? It is certainly not the first opera in the world of South Indian music. We have had Nauka Charitram created already. There was Nauka before that. There were other Nauka Charitram versions which had come out earlier. Arunachala Kavi's Nataka is there in full. And therefore, I spoke to you about Muthu Tandavar, I spoke to Marimutha Pillai. Let me come to Arunachala Kavi. You can make out very clearly that Bharati is influenced by Arunachala Kavi also, because all the dipadais, that is the dialogues between people set as songs, very clearly taken from Arunachala Kavi's Ramanatakam. Ramanatakam is full of conversations between two people, Parasurama and Lakshmana, Dasharatha and Kaikeyi, Shurpanaka and Rama, Ravana and Shurpanaka, Sita and Ravana, and so on and so forth. So many dialogues set as compositions to be sung by two people. And therefore, that whole idea is obviously taken from there and put to great effect by Bharati. Secondly, we imagine that Nandanar Charitram is only compositions. The list of compositions is phenomenal. 124 kirtanais, 70 kannis, 13 sinduppa, 3 nundi chindu, 17 virithams. This is the variety of compositional varieties that it incorporates. Similarly, there are also, even within this, several Marathi meters, like Khadga, which is actually Katuka, abdinu Tamil edirpa, Kadukka, and the Mari, but it's actually Khadga. So, Savai, Tihai, Dvipadas, Tripadas, these are all used by Gopala Krishna Bharati in creating the Nandanar Charitram. Therefore, he was building so much of variety into the composition. So, for instance, just to give you one example, the Nandanar has sung Vazhimarai Thirukkude, Siva has said Chatre Vilagi Irum Pillai, and Nandi has moved. Now, how do you describe the reaction of Nandanar on seeing the Nandi moving? And he's actually able to see Shiva in front of him. What is that thrill, that delight that he experienced at that moment? How difficult it is to put it into song. Just listen to what he does.
Kudittar yekkalittar உள்ளம் கழித்தார் பள்ளு படித்தார் கண்ணீர் வடித்தார் பற்களை கடித்தார் ஒரு தரம் துடித்தார் இருதரம் நடித்தார் தரிசனம் செய்தாரே நந்தனார் தரிசனம் செய்தாரே குதித்தார் எக்களித்தார் உள்ளம் கழித்தார் பள்ளு படித்தார் கண்ணீர் வடித்தார் பற்களை கடித்தார் ஒரு தரம் துடித்தார் இருதரம் நடித்தார் தரிசனம் செய்தாரே நந்தனார் தரிசனம் செய்தாரே இப்படி தரிசனம் செய்தாரே நந்தனார் தரிசனம் செய்தாரே நந்தனார் தரிசனம் செய்தாரே.
So this goes on for a few lines, but you can imagine how it's so tough to describe this. And there is Nandan has just gone mad. He is seeing the Nandi moving, he is seeing Shiva in front of him. That is what is being incorporated in that particular composition. Like this, there are so many examples that one can give. And I remember when Dr. Soumya staged the whole of the Arunachala Kavi Ramanatakam in the Music Academy 1 year as part of the morning conference.
Nandana Charitram.
Nandana Charitram in Music Academy. All of us were shedding tears. That was the impact of the play on a 21st century audience, almost 150 years or more after that particular play had been created. And just to give you an idea, Nandanar Charitram has remained in print ever since Isai brought it out. Till date. It has never gone out of print. It is amazing. There can be no other work like this, that the book has continuously, edition after edition, interpretation after interpretation, something or the other about Nandanar Charitram keeps coming out all the time. Bharati went on to create 3 other Puranas, Charitrams. Iyarpagai Nayanar Charitram, then Tirunilakanta Nayanar Charitram, which is one of my favorites as a Harikatha, but not, we don't have all his songs in it, and Karekalamayar Charitram. None of them ever achieved the kind of popularity that the Nandanar Charitram did. And because it was so popular, there were naturally lots of enemies for Gopala Krishna Bharati. It had to happen. There was somebody who had written a Charitram of Tirunavukarasar at the same time, and it had laid an instantaneous egg, as Woodhouse would have put it. Nobody was listening to it. And everybody, Nandan Charitram was the rage. Everybody was wanting Nandan Charitram. I'm sure if Woodhouse had written, he would have said, next to the Aspidistra and the whatnot, in every house from Euston to Ealing, a copy of Nandan Charitram was found. Stockbrokers wept over it. Clergymen preached about it. I can imagine what it must have been at that time. But anyway, but this man was naturally very jealous. And he felt that Bharati had taken liberties with the Periya Puranam. He had created characters who didn't exist. How dare he? So, Nandan Charitirathai Kelade, Naalum Vanda Daridrandan Malade. So, if you listen to Nandanar Charitram, finished. Tan Tanamaki Kulvan Dadi Brahmachari. Thayalar Mel Perum Kama Vihari. So, they assassinated his character also, straight away. Periya Puranathile Irupadai Vittu, பேய்த்தனமாக இவன் சொன்னதை தொட்டு அரிய புலவர்க்கு வந்ததே சொட்டு ஐயையோ அத்தனையும் கதை கட்டு. So this scurrilous composition was circulated among the public. Sheer jealousy. Now Bharati's followers were not going to give up. They began working on a counter. And they worked on 2 lines. Because that was Tirunavukarasar Puranam. Appan Charitirathai Kelade, Kapparayum Kayumai Nillade. So this was the beginning. But Bharati got to know about it and told them to shut up. He said, I am not interested in having this kind of controversy. That man is upset. Let him be. But you cannot be indulging in this kind of mudslinging. Let's be with some dignity. And he goes back to his Mudikondam, Ananda Tandavapuram, and he continues to live over there. Unfortunately for him, this is when he has certain difficulties. So one is that Bharati's patron Annu Iyer dies. And Annu Iyer's son Vengu Iyer says that there is no money that you have given my father, which is with us. So Bharati has to struggle. He has to fight the whole thing, and finally that 3,600 rupees that he had saved and given Annu Iyer is restored to him. He becomes very distressed at all this that has happened, at the scurrilous, character assassination and then this. So he leaves, and then he begins going from place to place. During the course of his wanderings, he arrives in Thiruvannamalai. And he arrives on the day of the Deepam, which is between yesterday and today. And he composes a song for that. Let us listen to it.
Kandale kande, Kandale kande, Verundrum எண்ணாமலே நின்றேன், கண்ணாலே கண்டேன், வேறொன்றும் எண்ணாமலே நின்றேன், கண்ணாலே கண்டேன். பண்ணாத புண்ணிய பரிபாகமே பண்ணாத புண்ணிய பரிபாகமே பண்ணாத புண்ணிய பரிபாகமே திரு அண்ணாமலையானை உண்ணாமூலையுடன் பண்ணாத புண்ணிய பரிபாகமே திரு அண்ணாமலையானை உண்ணாமூலையுடன் கண்ணாலே கண்டேன். ஹர ஹர சிவ சிதம்பரவென்பர் அம்பல பரதேசிகள். ஹர ஹர சிவ சிதம்பரவென்பர் அம்பல பரதேசிகள். அருணகிரியின் மகிமையை கொண்டாடுவார் ஸ்தலவாசிகள். அரியத்தவங்களை புரிந்து மூலத்தழல் எழுப்புவர் நேசிகள். ஆனந்தாமிருதம் கொண்டு தன்னை அறிவார் ஞான பிரகாசிகள். பெரிய கோபுரமும் திருவீதியும் பெரிய கோபுரமும் திருவீதியும் பிறங்கு சீர்த்திரும் தேரும் தீர்த்தமும். பெரிய கோபுரமும் திருவீதியும் பிறங்கு சீர்த்திரும் தேரும் தீர்த்தமும். பிரியராங்குகை நமச்சிவாயிரம் பெரிய பக்தரம் மடமும் ஜோதியும். பெரிய கோபுரமும் திருவீதியும் பிறங்கு சீர்த்திரும் தேரும் தீர்த்தமும். பிரியராங்குகை நமச்சிவாயிரம் பெரிய பக்தரம் மடமும் ஜோதியும் கண்ணாலே கண்டேன். புந்தி மகிழவே ஹுக்கா குடித்திடும் புந்தி மகிழவே ஹுக்கா குடித்திடும் புகையினால் ஆமோதமும். புந்தி மகிழவே ஹுக்கா குடித்திடும் புகையினால் ஆமோதமும். புறையில்லாத ஔவல்தடர் கூடி புகழ்ந்திடும் சதுர்வேதமும். பந்தி பந்தியாய் தேவதாசிகள் பாடி வரும் சங்கீதமும். பாரணந்த கோபால கிருஷ்ணன் பணிந்திடும் திருப்பாதமும். அந்தி வேளையில் மண்டபங்களில் ஆரதி கற்பூரம் புகைந்திட. அந்தி வேளையில் மண்டபங்களில் ஆரதி கற்பூரம் புகைந்திட. சிந்தை மகிழவே மலை முகட்டினில் தீப தரிசனம் தாபம் தீரவே. அந்தி வேளையில் மண்டபங்களில் ஆரதி கற்பூரம் புகைந்திட. சிந்தை மகிழவே மலை முகட்டினில் தீப தரிசனம் தாபம் தீரவே கண்ணாலே கண்டேன். வேறொன்றும் எண்ணாமலே நின்றேன் கண்ணாலே கண்டேன்.
Nobody knows what happened to Bharati for some time in the middle, and it is often speculated that he became a close companion of Vallalar Ramalinga Swamigal. Of this, again, there is no factual evidence, there is only a hearsay. But it is believed that he spent at least till the 1870s when Vallalar demanifested himself. Till such a time, it is believed that Bharati was with Vallalar. And then in Tula, in the month of Tula, when the Kaveri is in spate and the Tula Sthanam happens in Mayuram, one morning Bharati was found to be having his bath in the Lagada Padithurai, Tulagada Padithurai in Mayavaram. And that evening, there was going to be a Harikatha by Tanjavur Krishna Bhagavatar. And he was performing Nandanar Charitram based upon Bharati. And so Bharati, along with Mahavaidyanath Sivan and his brother Ramaswamy Sivan, Mahavaidyanath Sivan is the one seated, Tanjavur Krishna Bhagavatar is the one standing, and he attends his own Harikatha, his own opera being performed as a Harikatha by Tanjavur Krishna Bhagavatar. He is very happy that it has reached this level of fame and popularity. Thereafter, he makes Mayavaram his base once again. He is found very often seated playing a violin on the Tulagatta Padithurai in the market. This is by the way, it's a horrible market on most days, except for the Tulasnanam days when it is cleared up and it is kept like this. And so this is where Shiva comes and performs his famous Gauri Tandava in order to attract Abhayambal and take her away. So this is where Bharati would sit leaning against one of the pillars, and he would be playing the violin, and he would be humming and singing to himself. Very happy man. And he was totally contented. And when he needed to stay, he stayed in the Thinnai of his disciple's house. This is not that house, just a representative, because when I went to Mayavaram, this was the only house that was like that in that street. So I just took that photograph. Bharati had a very unique system of banking. So you remember he had the 3,000 rupees. So that money he earmarked for various charities, which I will come to in a next slide. But money still kept coming, right? People were offering him money for performances. He didn't need it. So he would tell them, you keep it with you. When needed, I will ask for it. And he would write down in a notebook that so-and-so has offered me so much on this particular date. And then people would approach Bharati for money, for various things. He would say, you go and meet that person who has promised to give me so much on this date. So they would go and collect that money. So this is how Bharati lived. There is a popular demand for Irakkam Varamal. Let us do that, and then we come to the final slides.
Irakkam Varamal Ponadenna Karanam. Irakkam Varamal Ponadenna Karanam. Swamikku Irakkam Varamal Ponadenna Karanam. En Swamikku Irakkam Varamal Ponadenna Karanam. En Swamikku Irakkam Varamal Ponadenna Karanam. En Swamikku Irakkam Varamal Ponadenna Karanam. கருணை கடலென்று உன்னை 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 காதில் கேட்டு நம்பி வந்தேன். கருணை கடலென்று உன்னை காதில் கேட்டு நம்பி வந்தேன். இரக்கம் வராமல் போனதென்ன காரணம்? என் சுவாமிக்கு
In Mayuram, Bharati would meet with many people with whom he would become very close friends. The first was Subramanya Desikar of the Tiruvavaduturai Mutt, the Periya Sannidhi of Tiruvavaduturai Mutt, and he greatly admired Bharati's scholarship. And you remember the 3,400 and odd that Bharati had saved. Out of that, he kept some money for his own future requirements. He gave around 400 rupees to his disciple Ramaswamy Iyer, in whose Thinnai he used to live. The balance money he entrusted to Subramanya Desikar and said that every day Tair Sadam with Tenga Tugayal must be made for 6 people at the Agastishwara temple shrine in Mayavaram, and it should be given as a permanent endowment. And Subramanya Desikar accepted that money, and thereafter that was carried out. When Bharati would visit Subramanya Desikar, knowing that he was very fond of music, Desikar would invite great Vidwans to come and perform, so that Bharati would also listen to them in his company, and then he would leave. That was the friendship. Arumuga Navalar, who came from Sri Lanka, the sworn enemy of Vallalar Ramalinga Swamigal, interestingly, both were close friends of Bharati. Arumuga Navalar also was very close to Bharati. At the age of 17, Swaminatha Iyer comes to Mayuram in order to take Tamil lessons from Mahavidwan Meenakshi Sundaram Pillai. And Swaminatha Iyer's father, Venkat Subramanya Iyer, takes Swaminatha Iyer to meet Bharati, who is seated at the Tulagatta Paditurai playing the violin. And Bharati is very interested in meeting young Swaminathan, and he says that, I would like to teach you music. But you better find out from your guru, Meenakshi Sundaram Pillai, whether he would like you to learn music. Because Tamil scholars, the padachedam which happens in music, they are very unforgiving of that. And he said, this may not be to your guru's liking. So for a while, Swaminatha Iyer does both. He doesn't tell Meenakshi Sundaram Pillai that he is learning from Bharati, but he continues. Then Meenakshi Sundaram Pillai gets to know about it and tells him, no, this is not should not be continued. And Swaminatha Iyer gives up music, becomes a disciple of Meenakshi Sundaram Pillai. But he is the one who first wrote the biography of Gopala Krishna Bharati. Without that biography, we would not get many pieces of information as facts. They would only be tales. It's because of Swaminatha Iyer that it has the factual accuracy in what is being told. But Bharati himself is very keen on meeting with Meenakshi Sundaram Pillai. He wants a verse in praise of his Nandanar Charitram from Meenakshi Sundaram Pillai. Meenakshi Sundaram Pillai is not very keen. He thinks that the Tamil you read Swaminatha Iyer's Meenakshi Sundaram Pillai Charitram, there are several verses of Meenakshi Sundaram Pillai that are given. Jaw-breaking Tamil with very high level of erudition required to understand the import of what is being said. Very scholarly. Whereas this is the language of every day. So naturally a man like that would not consider this to be great. So Bharati makes many attempts and is rebuffed. Then one afternoon he goes to Meenakshi Sundaram Pillai's house. Pillai is sleeping. Bharati waits outside, and gradually, because he's got time on his hands, he begins to sing. And as he begins singing, inside Meenakshi Sundaram Pillai wakes up. And then he comes to the window and he listens to what Bharati is singing. He's so moved that he comes out and says, I had held back for so long, but now I will gladly give you a pairam which will be in praise of your work. So, Komevum Tirithillai Natarasa Perimandral Kudi Uinda Pumevu Peranbar Tirunalai Povartham Punida Sirai Pamevu Palavagaya Visai Patal Inimayura Padi Indan Yemevu Gopala Kiruttina Bharati Ennum Isai Vallone. This is the verse that Meenakshi Sundaram Pillai writes in praise of Bharati. The Subramanya Desikar, Meenakshi Sundaram Pillai, and there was a third, Mayuram Vedanayakam Pillai, the Munsif, a Roman Catholic with great interest in Carnatic music. There are verses in praise of Desikar by Vedanayakam Pillai. Desikar, the head of the Tiruvavaduturai Mutt, is writing in praise of Mayuram Vedanayakam Pillai in return, saying, yesterday I came to meet you. When I left, I found that something was missing. You thief, return the heart that you took away from me. In the Mari, that is how they, corresponded with each other. And this was the great minds that, that coexisted and lived at the same time. Bharati obviously must have listened to Vedanayakam Pillai talk about his times in court. And, he himself has written about Vedanayakam Pillai himself has written about the impossibility of getting money from people to whom you have loaned it. And about the problems many of Vedanayakam Pillai's songs are also about the problems of dealing with law. I will not talk about it because there are lots of things dealing with the law at any given point of time as the secretary of the Music Academy. But the point is that Bharati is obviously, he has heard those stories. And he composes a song, Parthu Kadan Kodungal. Give money very carefully.
பார்த்து கடன் கொடுங்கள், பார்த்து கடன் கொடுங்கள், மனிதரை பார்த்து கடன் கொடுங்கள், பார்த்து கடன் கொடுங்கள், மனிதரை பார்த்து கடன் கொடுங்கள், பார்த்து கடன் கொடுங்கள். பார்த்து கடன் கொடுக்காவிடில் பணம் போகும், பார்த்து கடன் கொடுக்காவிடில் பணம் போகும், பழுதை போலிருந்து பாம்பு போலாகும். பார்த்து கடன் கொடுக்காவிடில் பணம் போகும், பழுதை போலிருந்து பாம்பு போலாகும். பார்த்து கடன் கொடுங்கள். கொடுத்த கடன் வெறும் அடகு விசாரம், கொடுத்த கடன் வெறும் அடகு விசாரம், கோர்ட்டு கச்சேரிக்கு போவது கோரம். கொடுத்த கடன் வெறும் அடகு விசாரம், கோர்ட்டு கச்சேரிக்கு போவது கோரம். தடுத்து கேட்டால் அவர் மனது விகாரம், தடுத்து கேட்டால் அவர் மனது விகாரம். களவு போனால் துன்பம் அது ஒரு வாரம், களவு போனால் துன்பம் அது ஒரு வாரம். பார்த்து கடன் கொடுங்கள். வாது வழக்குகள் பேச கொண்டாட்டம், வாது வழக்குகள் பேச கொண்டாட்டம். வாரண்ட் வந்தால் காரைக்கால் ஓட்டம், வாது வழக்குகள் பேச கொண்டாட்டம். வாரண்ட் வந்தால் காரைக்கால் ஓட்டம், வாது வழக்குகள் பேச கொண்டாட்டம். வாரண்ட் வந்தால் காரைக்கால் ஓட்டம். பாதகமில்லாமல் குடியிருந்தீட்டம், பாதகமில்லாமல் குடியிருந்தீட்டம். பகல் சேர்த்திருடர்களில் இவர் சிரேஷ்டம், பாதகமில்லாமல் குடியிருந்தீட்டம். பகல் சேர்த்திருடர்களில் இவர் சிரேஷ்டம். பார்த்து கடன் கொடுங்கள், மனிதரை பார்த்து கடன் கொடுங்கள், பார்த்து கடன் கொடுங்கள், பார்த்து கடன் கொடுங்கள், பார்த்து கடன் கொடுங்கள்.
So the warrant Vandal Karaikal Otam is because Karaikal was French territory. So if you got an arrest warrant in British India, you fled immediately. So that is what he mentioned. So Bharati spends his final years in Mayuram, in the Agasthyeswara temple, inside the Mayuranatha Swami temple. That is where he passes away in 1881. But Bharati lived on thanks to the Nandan Charitram. The Nandan Charitram lived on essentially because of the Harikatha tradition. Harikatha performers took to Nandanath Charitram like none other. Embar Vijayaraghavacharya, his father Embar Srirangacharya, they considered Nandanath Charitram to be their Kudumba Sottu. They would perform Nandanath Charitram See, Saraswati Bai has said that she performed Nandanar Charitram 10,000 times in her life. And she said that there was no other Harikatha that a Kannada speaking lady who wrote Tamil in the Telugu script was doing Nandanar Charitram. So this is how the Nandan Charitram became so very famous. Harikatha really took Nandanar Charitram to great heights. It left behind a huge impress on poets thereafter. Subramanya Bharati himself, many of his compositions have lots to do with the Nandanar Charitram. So, Jnanam Dano Neer Sollum Oi Nandanare Namma Jadiki Kadukkumo Nam Enna Seivom Pulayare, sorry, Oi Tilakare Nam Jadiki Kadukkumo Seivadi Seriyo Sollum. This was Bharatiyar singing it. So, like this, there are several compositions of Bharati which can be traced, Subramanya Bharati, which can be traced back to Gopala Krishna Bharati in terms of structure. Then, Nandanar Charitram became a part of plays, theatre. And theatre took Nandanar Charitram to great levels because you could have everybody. Harikatha required one person to perform all the roles. Here you had multiple people. Finally, Nandanar Charitram made it into films. So in 1937, it came as a talkie for the first time with K.B. Sundarambal as Nandanar and Maharajapuram Vishwanath Iyer as Vediyar, Asandas Chellaram. And the film was a flop, but it is known essentially because Sundarambal acted as a male and she got 1 lakh as her compensation in 1937 for acting in that film. Now that was a flop, but in the 1940s when Gemini Vasan set his hand to it, Nandanar became a super hit, with M.M. Dandapani Desigar as Nandan and Serikadathur Shama as the Vediyar. And it is said that before Gemini started production of Nandanar, Saraswati Bai was invited to come and perform the Nandanar Charitram for the 600 of the Gemini staffers so that they could all witness it. And at the end of it, Vasan said, அந்த ஒரு அம்மா பண்ணினதை நீங்கள் 600 பேர் இப்போ பண்ணணும். So that was his mandate to the people. And till date, Gemini's Nandanar remains one of the most evocative Nandanars. It is available on YouTube to watch in full. I'm going to finish the last 2 slides. So we will just play the climactic scene from Nandanar Charitram as seen in Gemini. It's a Viritam sung in 2 ragas by Dandapani Desigar. He has entered the fire, come out of the fire. And by the way, that story has had its own post-independence interpretations. Indira Parthasarathy, for instance, speculates that Nandan possibly was burned to death in the fire. And it was a story that was bruited abroad that he had merged with the Lord. We don't know. But for us, Nandan Charitram ends with Nandan merging with the Lord. We leave it at that. And I will also show you how N.S. Krishnan interpreted Nandanar Charitram. But before that, Dandapani Desigar, and then move on.
Vitaga deva deva Menyana murtiye Anyana irulada Vilange sambododiye Menyana murtiye Anyana irulada Vilange sambododiye புறாடுமை மனம் குளிர புறாடுமை மனம் குளிர மாலயனும் கொண்டாட வெள்ளிமலை மேல் பொழுதிருந்த நீ அடிமை யானை அடைந்த ஏறாடும் எம்மலர் சேவடி எடுத்தாடும் எந்தையே ஏறாடும் எம்மலர் சேவடி எடுத்தாடும் எந்தையே ஏறாடும் எம்மலர் சேவடி எடுத்தாடும் எந்தையே காட்சி தருவாய் காட்சி தருவாய் எந்தையே காட்சி தருவாய் ஏதும் அறியா பேதை எனையாள வேண்டும் என் இறைவனே நடராஜனே.
So that is the traditional interpretation of Nandan. Many years later, when Milton Singer would interview Saraswati Bai, he would ask her, what do you think needs to be done with Harikatha to revive it? The Puranas, who's going to listen? And she said that if a Harikatha has to be done about digging wells and creating water supply and toilets, that has to be done too. It's the message that will have to be carried forward to the people. And so Nandan Charitram lent itself beautifully to that. In a post-independence nation that was trying to find its own identity, everybody was a Nandan because we all came from various stages of deprivation. It was only the scale that differed. Some people were higher up on the scale, some people were lower down on the scale. Nandan, I think, struck a very ready chord with everybody. And Nandan, therefore, could be interpreted in multiple ways. In Periyathambi, N.S. Krishnan did Kindan Charitram. So, Nandan Charitrame Anandam Atyantam Kindan Charitrame Kindal Allave Alla. That is how it starts. But the story is about a boy in a village who wants to go to the city in order to get educated. So, Nandan wants to go to Chidambaram in order to merge with the Lord. Here, the boy wants to go to the city in order to get educated. And therefore, he approaches his, I'm only playing a very short section of it. Here he is approaching his village, the headmaster, for money in order to go to the town to study.
நம்ம நந்தனார் சரித்திரத்திலே ஒரு வேதியர் இருந்தாரு, அத போல கிந்தன் சரித்திரத்திலே ஒரு வாத்தியார் இருக்கிறாரு. அந்த வாத்தியார் வீட்டுக்கு வந்து சேர்ந்தாங்க. சார் யாரானே? நன்னனுங்க கிண்டே, உங்ககிட்ட ஒரு விஷயம் சொல்லதுக்கு வந்திருக்கேன். விஷயமா? என்னடா விஷயம் சொல்லு கேட்கிறேன். சென்னை என்றோது தலைமிரு குதாம், அங்கே சென்ற தேதி செலவும் வரவும் அதிகமாகுதாம். சென்னை தலைமிரு குதாம், போய் வர கொஞ்சம் பொருளை தாருமே, உங்கள் பூசு காலை போற்றினே கண்ணால் பாருமே. ஐயனே சென்னை என்றொரு பயமில்லாதன் எதிரே இனிமேல் இல்லாதே அதை சொல்லாதே மனப்பயலே. நீ பட்டணம் என்று சொல்லப்படுமோடா 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 மனப்பயலே. பட்டணம் என்பதை விடு, பழைய சோத்தை சாப்பிடு, இந்த பட்டி காட்டில் படித்திடு, நல்ல பையன் நல்ல பேரெடுத்திடு மனப்பயலே. நீ பட்டணம் என்று சொல்லப்படுமோடா 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 மனப்பயலே.
So the reaction of the man on coming to know that he was having to go to the city in order to study, so this is how it was met with. So Nandan faced opposition. That was the final takeaway from the story. Against enormous deprivation and opposition, Nandan finally succeeds in his chosen mission. I think this positive message was what Gopala Krishna Bharati really succeeded in giving. The story of hope, that at the end of it, despite every obstacle that is placed in your way, if you have the passion for it, ultimately you will reach where you wanted to reach. And to me, The embodiment of it is this mandapam in front of Tirupungur, where Nandan's statue is. When you go there and you see it, and you see Gopala Krishna Bharati on top, you see the Vedyar and Nandanar in statues there, and you see Nandan down below. This net takeaway is that there is always hope. And with devotion and with faith and complete surrender, we will be able to achieve what we set out to achieve in life. And that is the secret of Gopala Krishna Bharati's eternal fame and success. Thank you very much for having been here. Thank you. Thank you.
Friends, that was Sri Ram today. Please give a standing ovation to him. We thank both Sri Ram and Bharat Sundar for this wonderful lecdem.